The room was quiet. No one whispered, no one moved. Only the unchanging, almost agonizing sound of a solitary clock ticking against the distant wall. Tick, tock, tick, tock. All the sounds resonated like thunder inside a courtroom that had witnessed far too many shattered hearts pass through its doors. This wasn't any courtroom. This was where secrets that had been hidden for years were finally going to be revealed. Raw, brutal, and unrelenting. The illumination of the tall windows poured onto the highly polished wooden floor. Dust danced lazily in the sunlight, drifting slowly as if time itself didn't want to hurry on what was about to occur. The people shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, not out of impatience, but because they sensed it, that dense, indefinable heaviness that precedes something momentous occurring. And then, the courtroom doors swung open. They didn't swing wide. They didn't burst. They creaked. A low, slow sound that gave the chill of death to every spine in the room. It was as though the building itself had some inkling of what sort of storm was stepping inside. Kody Brown walked into the doorway. He had on a black suit, a white dress shirt, crisp. His hair was slicked back. His movements cautious, measured. But it wasn't the suit that everyone noticed. It wasn't the attire, the stance, or the manner in which the bailiff escorted him to his seat quietly. It was his eyes. Kody was frightened for the first time. His normal confidence, that brash, boisterous energy he wore like armor, wasn't present. His shoulders were slumped, his breathing light. He looked around the room, not with strength, but with the furtive fear of a man who realizes, all at once, that he has no control anymore. At the far end of the room, Meri, Christine, Janelle, and Robyn Brown sat. But today was not like that. They were not sitting together as wives. They were not grasping for the fantasy of an unbroken family. They were witnesses. Meri's hands were folded tightly on her lap, knuckles white, her lips pressed into a thin line, the kind of silence that carried years of unspoken words. Christine sat upright, but her body was tense, like she was holding back a storm. Janelle's face was steady. Too steady, the kind of stillness that only comes from someone who has already cried all their tears. And Robyn, she sat a little to the side, her head bent forward, her eyes glazed. She was not at the center of his universe today. She was merely another fragment in a tale that had at long last come to its breaking point. The air hung heavy, thick, as though the whole world was leaning forward to hear. The judge walked in, and everyone stood. The creak of wooden benches was heard in the silence. Then, in a soft, practiced tone, the judge said, "This court will now hear the case." Those were familiar words. They'd been uttered in innumerable rooms like this one, for innumerable cases. But in this room, on this day, they had a different ring. They sliced through the air like a blade. Everyone in the room understood that this wasn't about contracts or land. This wasn't merely a matter of a legal ruling. This was about years of suffering, betrayal, and broken promises. Kody fidgeted with his tie, desperate to steady his shaking hands. He caught a glimpse up, just long enough to catch Christine's gaze. She didn't blink. She didn't look away. She just gazed back, and in that glance he saw every sentence she'd never verbalized. Robyn gently blotted a tear from her face. Her lips trembled, but she remained silent. Not yet. The clock ticked once more. Tick, tack. Every eye was on Kody. Every heartbeat was loud. You could feel it, that invisible pull that happens right before a dam finally breaks. Meri's eyes glistened. She didn't want to cry. Not here. Not in front of him. But there was something about this moment, this collision of past and present, that made holding everything in almost impossible. Christine tightened her fists, the nails pressing into her skin. Her breath was shaky, but controlled. She slumped forward a little and whispered to herself, "This is it. No more silence. No more pretending the family was all right. No more being the quiet one. No more letting him control the story." The bailiff's voice cut through the tension. "All rise." The judge sat down, and so did the rest. But Kody lingered. His knees didn't move as quickly as before. There was something almost delicate in the way he sank into the chair. The one-time booming man was now suddenly tiny. And then there was the moment that no one could be ready for. The moment when silence was more vocal than words. Christine's chest constricted. Her brain flashed back over years of seconds. Christmas mornings that didn't look like Christmas. Dinners with the family when she was a guest in her house. Quiet nights spent crying feet away from the man who had vowed to love her, be loyal to her, and respect her, but gave his heart to someone else instead. Meri sat looking ahead, reliving the moment when everything within her froze. The day that she knew she was no longer his first priority. She had smiled. She had remained. But part of her had perished that day, and he never even realized. Janelle closed her eyes momentarily. She was not a woman who was prone to making scenes. She had always been rock steady, the eye of the hurricane, but even stability has its limits. She recalled standing on the porch, gazing at the man whom she had shared her dreams with, and realizing she was building by herself. And Robyn? She felt her heart pound. She had once been special, chosen. But it had twisted inside of her with time. She watched him withdraw from the others, and she knew deep inside that she had been a part of their suffering. Shame weighed in her chest, more than any of them could ever know. The judge spoke, outlining the guidelines of the hearing. Legal jargon hovered in the air, but no one was actually hearing it. Everyone in that room was stuck in their own memories. All those years of love that had soured into resentment. Christine's lawyer stood up. His tone was level, but firm. Your Honor, this is not a legal case. This is a tale of a family disintegrating. Kody's face set. His attorney put a hand on his shoulder, but it did nothing to soothe him. Nothing would. Behind them, the gallery was occupied by a handful of subdued spectators. Friends from far away, individuals who had once been drawn to the notion of a perfect family. But as they observed the man at the center, they did not see a leader. They observed a man trapped by the burden of his own decisions. Softly flickered the lights above as the morning sun brightened through the high windows. Christine shifted in her seat. She wasn't afraid anymore. For years, she had kept quiet to keep the peace. But today wasn't about peace. It was about truth. Real, brutal, healing truth. Meri's lips finally parted. Just a little. She didn't speak out loud, but if someone had been close enough, they might have heard her whisper. Finally. Robyn breathed slowly. Her hands trembled. She used to want to guard him. But now, even she couldn't pretend what was real didn't exist. Kody sat with his fists clenched tightly, gaze locked on the surface in front of him. His breathing became labored. He felt it, the burden of every choice, every silenced plea, every time love had been derailed by ego. And for the first time, there was no hiding place. The judge's gavel struck the block. Bang. This court will hear the testimony. Those words did more than open a case. They opened the wounds. Kody inhaled sharply, his throat tightening. Christine's eyes locked on him. Meri's hands trembled, but didn't break. Janelle sat tall, steady as a stone. Robyn clutched a tissue, already crying. The storm had officially begun. No one in that courtroom knew how it would end, but everyone understood one thing. This wasn't just a fight about the past. It was a reckoning. The judge's voice resounded through the room like a sluggish wave. Kody Brown stepped forward. The room was quiet once more, but it wasn't the same quiet as before. This time it was thicker. You could swear that the air closed in around everyone's chest. Kody slowly stood up from her chair. Her hands shook minutely as she ironed out the folds in her dress. Not because she was apprehensive about what to say, but because saying it gave her no choice but to confront everything she had concealed for so long. She moved one cautious step at a time toward the witness stand. Each tap of her heels on the shiny floor sounded like a heartbeat. Tick, tack, tick, tack. She did not glance at Kody initially. She gazed directly in front of her, chin up, taking big breaths, but she felt his gaze on her. The man who had once been entrusted with her life, now seated there, watching as she moved toward the truth. The bailiff led her to the stand gently. Kody extended her right hand, promising to tell the truth. Her voice was weak but firm. I do. Then she sat down. She listened to the silence for a moment. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the entire courtroom could hear it, but she gathered her strength slowly. the kind of strength that's gained from enduring pain, rather than evading it. The lawyer approached the stand cautiously. He didn't hurry. He understood that this wasn't testimony. This was opening a wound. Christine, the attorney said softly, can you inform the court? When did things start to change? Christine breathed in tremulously. Her eyes flashed. Not towards the room, not towards the attorney, but towards the recollections running in her mind. It began slowly. She started. Not with a struggle, not with screaming. It began with silence. Her voice wavered slightly, but she continued. At first, I figured it was a phase. Families do that, right? But then I began to notice little things. He didn't look at me the way he used to look at me. He didn't notice me anymore. We would be in the same room, but I was invisible. The room was silent. Even the clock appeared to hold its breath. Kody's eyes dropped. He tightened his hands into fists. Christine went on, her voice regaining strength. I did try to keep the family together. I gave it my all. I brought up our children. I kept the house warm. I was there for him through every choice, even the ones that I suffered through, because I had faith in us. Faith in our family. She looked over at Meri and Janelle. They nodded gently, their eyes the same as hers, filled with the same hurt. But gradually, it was apparent that we weren't all standing on the same side anymore. There was a change. A wall I couldn't ascend. She hesitated, locking eyes with Kody Brown for the first time. It wasn't a chilly gaze. It wasn't fury. It was reality, simple and unfaltering. You stopped fighting for us, she whispered. You stopped fighting for me. Kody swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed, but nothing came out. You'd sit across the table and discourse about love and harmony, she said, her voice increasing, but your eyes betrayed you. Your heart was elsewhere, and when Robyn arrived, I believed that I was strong enough to share, but I wasn't, because you didn't equally share yourself. You gave it all to her. The atmosphere in the room changed. Everyone looked at Robyn Brown. She ducked her head, and the first tears began to roll down her face. Christine's breath hitched for an instant. She wasn't here to accuse. She was here to be heard. I don't hate Robyn, she said quietly. I never hated Robyn. I hated that you used me and made me feel like I was the issue. Like my hurt was something I should feel ashamed of. Her voice shook now, but the authority in it increased. Whenever I talked, you pushed it aside. Whenever I wept, you said I should have faith. But faith is not a substitute for love, Kody. And love is not something you bestow upon one person when you've promised it to many. The lawyer stepped back. Christine no longer needed questions. She was narrating her story now. Do you recall that night? She blurted out, her gaze fixed on Kody. When I stood on the porch and pleaded with you to just look at me. Really look at me. And you wouldn't. You looked through me, like I was just another voice you didn't want to hear. Kody's shoulders fell. That memory wasn't one he could outrun. I went into the house that night and wept on the kitchen floor. She went on, her voice cracking, because that was when I realized the man I loved was no longer mine. He belonged to her. Or perhaps he didn't belong to anyone at all. There was a sniff in the gallery. Somebody dabbed their eyes. I stayed. I stayed longer than I should have stayed, because I believed in family. I believed in the vows we took. But with every day that I stayed, I lost more of me. Christine's tears finally escaped, flowing down her cheeks. But she didn't hide them. She let them fall. Do you have any idea, she said deliberately, what it's like to sit beside the man you love and feel like a stranger in your own house? To see him smile at someone else the way he smiled at you. To hear him stand up for someone else while not seeing the hurt you're causing. She drew a slow, deep breath. It kills you. Not all at once. Bit by bit. The judge leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed intently. No one budged. No one had the courage to speak. But the worst of it, Christine went on, her voice soft but unwavering now, was when I realized that you didn't even notice. You didn't notice me breaking down. You didn't notice me killing myself inside. Because to you, everything was okay. As long as you received what you wanted. Her fists tightened on her lap. Not with anger, but with the heaviness of memory. This case isn't about money. It isn't about legal titles or property. It's about the truth. It's about the years we spent keeping a broken family together. while you acted like everything was okay. She glanced over the courtroom. We all know the truth. We just never spoke it out loud. We pleaded with you to hear us, to love us like you said you would. But you didn't. You opted for silence. And now, this is what silence does. Kody's attorney shifted uncomfortably. Kody wiped his face, attempting to blink back the wetness welling up in his eyes. But Christine did not glance away. I'm not here to tear you down, she whispered. I'm here to cease tearing myself apart. Meri took a trembling breath. Janelle's jaw clenched. Robyn gripped a tissue. She couldn't help but sob. For years, Christine went on. I told myself love was about staying, no matter how much it hurt. But true love isn't founded in pain. It's founded in respect. And somewhere in the process, we lost that. The judge at last cleared their throat quietly. Mrs. Brown, they said softly. Is there something else you would like to say? Christine took a deep breath. For a second she did not speak. Then, in a voice that shook and conveyed every shattered promise, she said, yes, I want him to understand. I forgave him a long, long time ago. But I will no longer bear this pain. I'm tired of being quiet. And I'm tired of being unseen. She stood a little taller at that moment, not as a wife, not as a broken person, but as a woman, finally speaking her voice. The judge nodded. Thank you, Christine. You may be seated. As she returned to her chair, the room remained silent, but it was now a silence of impact, the kind of silence that envelops each and every individual and leaves one gasping. Kody looked at the ground, his face white, his fists were clenched, but for once not uncontrollable. In realization, the impact of her words struck him more forcefully than any legal blow ever could. Christine slowly sat down. Meri leaned over, putting a soothing hand on her hand. Janelle leaned in, a quiet tear rolling down her face. Even Robyn, who used to be the favorite, felt the bite of reality that nobody could avoid. Christine no longer wept. She took a long, liberating breath. The type of breath one takes when they've had a weight of a boulder on their chest for decades. The courtroom was perhaps silent, but the truth had been uttered, and once uttered it could never be buried again. The judge's voice boomed throughout the room like a rolling wave. Christine Brown, please come forward. The room was once more silent, but it wasn't the same silence as before. This time it was denser. You could almost sense the air constrict about everybody's chest. Christine slowly stood up. Her fingers quivered ever so slightly as she adjusted the material of her dress. Not because she didn't know what to do, but because speaking the words out loud would mean confronting all she had kept buried for years. One cautious step at a time, she moved towards the witness stand. Each of her shoes clicking on the shiny floor seemed to ring out like the beat of a heart. Tick, 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 tick. She did not glance at Kody initially. She stared ahead, chin raised, inhaling deeply, but she sensed he was gazing at her. The man she once relied on with her life, now sitting there, observing her approach the truth. The bailiff escorted her to the stand, with a soft smile. Christine lifted her right hand and vowed to tell the truth. Her tone was gentle, but firm. I do. Then she sat down. For an instant she listened to the silence. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone in the courtroom could hear it. But gradually she summoned her strength. The kind of strength born of living through agony, not shying away from it. The lawyer moved toward the stand. Cautiously, he didn't hurry. He knew this wasn't merely testimony. This was the starting of an opening wound. Christine, the attorney said softly. Can you tell the court, when did things start to change? Christine drew a quivering breath. Her gaze flashed, not to the room, not to the attorney, but to the memories flashing in her mind. It began slowly, she started. Not with a struggle, not with screaming. It began with silence. Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't break. At first I thought it was a phase. Families do that, right? But then I began to notice small things. He didn't look at me the way he used to. He no longer saw me. We would be in the same room, but he made me feel like I wasn't there. The room was silent. Even the clock took a breath. Kody's eyes fell. He made fists of his hands. Christine went on, her voice getting stronger. I did my best to keep the family together. I gave all I had. I brought up our children. I kept home warm. I supported him with every choice, even the painful ones, because I believed in us. I believed in our family. She looked over at Meri and Janelle. They nodded quietly, their eyes shining with the same pain. But gradually, it was apparent that we weren't all standing on the same side anymore. There was a transition, a wall that I couldn't scale. She paused, her gaze meeting Kody Brown's for the first time. It wasn't cold, it wasn't anger. It was truth, plain and irrefutable. "You stopped fighting for us," she whispered. "You stopped fighting for me." Kody swallowed hard. His throat bobbed, but nothing emerged. "You'd sit across from me at the table and discuss love and oneness," she said, her voice climbing. "But your eyes spoke of other things. Your heart was elsewhere. And when Robyn arrived, I believed I was big enough to share. But I wasn't, because you shared yourself unequally. You gave it all to her." The room air changed. Every eye turned to Robyn Brown. She dropped her head, tears already streaming down her face. Christine's breath hitched for a moment. She wasn't here to blame. She was here to be heard. "I don't dislike Robyn," she whispered. "I never did. I disliked the way you treated me, like I was the issue. Like my hurting was something to be ashamed of." Her voice shook now, but the strength in it built. "Each time I talked, you dismissed it. Each time I wept, you said have faith. But faith is not a substitute for love, Kody, and love isn't something you bestow on one individual when you've promised many." The lawyer moved back a step. Christine no longer had questions. She was relating now. "Do you recall that night?" she interrupted, her gaze fixed on Kody. "When I stood on the porch and pleaded with you to just look at me. Really, honestly look at me. And you wouldn't. You gazed over me, as if I were merely another voice you did not wish to hear." Kody's shoulders deflated. That memory was one he could not outrun. "I went home that evening and wept on the kitchen floor," she went on, her voice cracking, "because that was when I knew that the man that I loved was no longer mine. He was hers. Or perhaps, he was never anyone's." There was a sniffle from the gallery. A hand was hastily wiped across eyes. "I remained. I lingered longer than I ought to have, because I held on to family, because I held on to promises we made, and yet each day that I lingered, I lost a part of myself." Christine's tears at last escaped, falling down her face, but she didn't hide them. She allowed them to fall. "Do you know what it's like," she said deliberately, "to sit beside the man you love, and feel like a stranger in your home? To see him smile at someone else the way he used to smile at you? To hear him defend someone else while he denies your pain?" She breathed deep and long. "It kills you. Not all at once. Piece by piece." The judge leaned forward a little, hearing intently. Nobody budged. Nobody wanted to speak. "But the worst of it," Christine went on, her tone soft but firm now, "was when I saw you didn't even notice. You didn't notice me falling apart. You didn't notice me dying inside. Because to you, everything was all right, as long as you got what you needed." Her fist closed on her lap, not of anger but of the burden of remembering. "This case isn't about money. It isn't about legal titles or property. It's about the truth. It's about the years we spent holding a broken family together while you pretended everything was perfect." She scanned the courtroom. "We all know the truth. We simply never spoke it aloud. We pleaded with you to listen to us, to love us as you vowed. But you did not. You chose silence. And now, this is what silence looks like." Kody's attorney shifted uncomfortably. Kody rubbed his face, attempting to blink away the wetness that had begun to form in his eyes. But Christine didn't flinch. "I'm not here to hurt you," she whispered. "I'm here to stop hurting myself." Meri took a trembling breath. Janelle's jaw clenched. Robyn held a tissue, sobbing uncontrollably. "For years," Christine went on, "I told myself love was about staying no matter how much it hurt. But love isn't constructed on pain. Love is constructed on respect. And somewhere along the way, we lost that." The judge at last cleared their throat. "Mrs. Brown," they spoke softly, "is there anything else you'd like to say?" Christine took a breath. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, her voice shaking with every broken vow, she spoke. "Yes, I want him to know. I forgave him a long time ago. But I will not bear this wound anymore. I'm done being quiet, and I'm done being invisible." She stood just a little taller then. Not as a wife, not as one who was broken, but as a woman finally speaking for herself. The judge nodded. "Thank you, Christine. You may step down." As she returned to her seat, the room remained quiet, but this time it was a silence of effect. the sort of silence that encompasses each person and leaves them gasping. Kody gazed at the ground, his complexion wan, his fists were balled, but for once, not uncontrollable. Out of awareness, the force of her words struck him more forcefully than any judicial punch ever might. Christine settled herself down slowly. Meri reached across and put a gentle hand on hers. Janelle moved closer, a soft tear sliding down her face. Even Robyn, who had felt like the anointed one, felt the sharp point of truth that no one could avoid. Christine didn't cry anymore. She breathed out a long, liberating breath, the kind of breath someone lets out after having a boulder on their chest for years. The courtroom could have been silent, but the truth had been said. And once said, it could never again be buried. The courtroom door had been closed for a long time. The walls of the room now contained every word Christine had ever said. Her truth was no longer a secret. It was out there, heavy, sharp, real. Kody sat rigidly in his chair, his jaw clenched, his hands clasped too neatly. But his eyes betrayed him. They were no longer steady. They blinked like a man caught between guilt and terror. Meri looked straight ahead, her face impassive. Christine sat in quiet fortitude now, not triumphant, but free. And then, all eyes turned to the woman sitting apart from the rest. Robyn Brown. Her fingers curled over the corner of a crumpled tissue. Her lips quivered as though words longed to escape, but didn't know how. She drew a trembling breath, and the judge's voice rang, a soothing firmness. "Mrs. Robyn Brown, please come forward." A silence settled over the room once more. Robyn didn't climb up fast. She climbed deliberately, as if every step was dragging her down. The soles of her shoes tapped gently on the wooden floor, a heartbeat before it would shatter. When she stood in front of the witness stand, her hands trembled as she lifted them to take the oath. "Do you swear to tell the truth?" I do," she breathed. Her voice was soft, cracking at the edges like fragile glass. She sat down, clutching the tissue with both hands. She tried to breathe steadily, but each inhale came with a shiver. The lawyer approached gently. "Robyn," he said, "you've heard Christine's testimony. You've been a part of this family. You've seen everything. Please tell the court your side." Robyn's shoulders shook. For a very long time, she did not say anything. Then, in a whisper that didn't quite make it to the back of the room, she whispered, "I never wanted this." The whole room leaned forward. Not because they were curious, but because those words had hurt. "I never wanted to be the cause of them suffering," she went on. "When I entered this family, I believed. I believed in all of us. I thought we would love one another, support each other, raise our children together. I thought we would be one." She let a tear fall on her cheek. She didn't even take the time to brush it away. "But the longer I was there," she stated, "the more I understood. I wasn't building up the family. I was tearing it down. Not because I meant to, but because he chose me differently than he chose them." Her voice broke hard on the final words, and her hand shook as she covered her mouth. The room was silent. Even the ticking of the clock seemed muted. Robyn turned to glance at Christine, Meri, and Janelle. "You have no idea how many nights I wept," she breathed. "How many times I looked at you and felt as though I was taking something that didn't belong to me. I watched him push you away and pull me in, and I loathed it. I loathed myself." Meri's eyes shone. Christine breathed out slowly, and Janelle's jaw relaxed a little. "I tried to mend it," Robyn continued. "I tried to get him to spend more time with you. I begged him to visit you. But whenever I said something, it only made things worse. He would get upset. He would say things such as, 'They don't want me around,' or 'They don't support me.' And then, he'd remain with me. And I let him." She pressed the tissue to her cheeks. Tears flowed freely now. "I let him," she said gently again, "because part of me enjoyed the attention. I wanted to feel special, but love shouldn't come at someone else's cost. I know that now." Her voice softened further, but the sincerity in it filled every corner of the room. Christine was right. He looked at me differently than he looked at them. And instead of fighting for them, I let it happen. I was the safe place for him to come running to. But while I was being chosen, they were being shattered. The judge observed her closely. No one interrupted. Even Kody remained motionless. "There were nights," Robyn went on, "when I'd hear him speak of them as if they didn't exist. He'd gripe. He'd complain. And I just sat there. I didn't defend them. I said to myself, it was none of my business. But in my heart, I knew silence is also a choice. Her shoulders trembled as she attempted to keep her own sense of composure. But the truth was spilling out now, and she couldn't halt it. I wanted to be loved, too, she whispered. But I didn't want it like this. I didn't want to be the reason they were crying themselves to sleep. She shifted her eyes to Kody, then slowly. Her eyes weren't soft. They weren't angry either. They were brimming with something deeper. Heartbreak. You made me feel special, Kody, she whispered. But you made me feel special while making them feel invisible. And I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. Kody's hands jerked. His breathing was irregular. He tried to say something, but the judge presented her stern gaze. This was her turn. Robyn's voice broke again. You promised us all love. But love is not something you share with your hands like cake. It is something you give with your heart. And your heart was not big enough for all of us. It only had room for me. And that broke everything. Her final words escaped as a confession she had been carrying around for years. The type that burns as it leaves. The judge nodded softly. Thank you, Robyn, you can step down. But Robyn didn't get up right away. She sat there, head down, shoulders shaking. When she did stand, her movements were slow, delicate. Christine watched her. Not with anger, but with something sad. Robyn had told the truth. That counted. Then the judge addressed the next witness. Janelle Brown, come forward. The mood changed. Robyn's testimony was heartbreaking, but everyone knew hers wouldn't be the same. She wasn't one to talk much. But when she did, her words pierced to the bone. Janelle Brown stood up from her chair with smooth, even movements. In contrast to Robyn, no shaking in her gait. Her heels clipped sharply as she moved. She didn't glance down. She didn't glance at the ground. She kept her eyes fixed ahead. She extended her right hand, promised to tell the truth. Sat down. The lawyer moved forward. But Janelle didn't let him ask a question. I know why I'm here, she said, clearly. So let's not waste time. Her voice was firm, confident, but beneath it there was weight. Years of quiet observation, finally finding a way out. Kody stopped being a husband a long time ago, she said. He became someone who wanted to control everything, but didn't want to be responsible for what happened after. Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I don't have long speeches like Christine, Janelle went on. I don't cry as much as Robyn, but I notice things. And I felt each time he pulled away. Each time he arrived with love for one, and apologies for the rest. She shifted her head slightly, and fixed her eyes directly on Kody. You used to look at us like we were a team, a family. But then something changed. It became about you, your wants, your rules, your feelings, not ours. Janelle leaned forward slightly, her hands together. I saw Christine tear herself apart, trying to keep this family afloat. I saw Meri wait for years for something that was never going to occur. And I saw Robyn receive love she didn't even ask for at the expense of all else. And you sat in the middle, playing victim. Kody's jaw clenched. His attorney moved over, but Janelle's words ripped through the room like lightning. Always said this family is breaking apart because they don't stand behind me. No, Kody. This family broke apart because you decided to be somebody that wasn't worth following. The aftermath of the silence was charged. You tell us you love us, she went on. But what you say doesn't equal love. Love is what you do, and what you did was pick yourself. Her tone gentled slightly. I loved you, I respected you. But I won't lie. I lost respect for you too. The day you stopped respecting us. She breathed in. I don't hate you. But I don't know the man sitting over there anymore. You're not the husband I used to trust. You're not the leader of our family anymore. You're just Kody. The judge observed her intently. Nobody in the room budged. Even the air was stagnant. This isn't about heartbreak. Janelle spoke deliberately. This is about years of not being heard, of being invisible while you existed. Like you were the only person who existed. She gazed at Robyn. I don't hold it against her. She didn't ruin us. You did. Robyn dabbed at a tear, motionless, nodding. I'm not here to cry or yell, Janelle concluded. I'm here to speak the truth aloud. We are finished living in the shadow of your decisions. She stood still, taller than before. Stronger. The judge nodded. Thank you, Mrs. Brown. As Janelle returned to her seat, something left unsaid hung in the air. The women were not merely recounting stories. They were taking back their voices. Kody sat unmoving. His eyes shone, his throat constricted. For the first time in so long, he wasn't the one talking. He was the one being heard. And the truth was louder than him. The judge glanced down at his documents, then slowly raised his gaze towards Meri. Mrs. Brown, he said softly, you are free to speak. The room moved. Even the air seemed to tense. Meri rose to her feet slowly. Her hands shook, but she didn't conceal them. She made her way towards the witness stand, with the silent resilience of one who has spent a long time mastering how to endure silence. Her heels clicked on the buffed floor, like tiny thunderclaps in the quiet courtroom. Kody's breath hitched. He had heard this woman's voice 1,000 times. Gentle, patient, longing to be heard. But today it was different. Meri didn't glance at the judge. She didn't glance at the audience. She stared straight at Kody. When she spoke, her voice was low. But it had the kind of power that silence gives you when it's been taken away from you for too long. Kody, she started, her throat constricting over the name. I wasted years thinking that love could repair everything. I kept thinking that if I waited long enough, if I was quiet enough, if I smiled in spite of the hurt, you would come back to me. Her voice broke, but she didn't quit. I remained long after my heart learned how to shatter. I remained when all the signs directed me to leave. Because I had faith in the narrative we shared with the world. I believed in the family we constructed. But the reality is, she caught her breath. You ceased looking at me a very long time ago. Kody's jaw dropped. His hands gripped the defense table. For a moment, he really looked like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. I recall the way you used to gaze at me. Meri went on, her voice dropping to a hurt whisper. Before the cameras rolled. Before it was all a show. I recall laughter. I recall being warm. And then, gradually, it just slipped away. Like a light being dimmed one switch at a time. Until there was nothing. Her eyes shone, but she would not let the tears fall. I begged you to talk to me, to fight for us. But you chose silence. You chose to let me stand alone in a marriage, where only one of us was trying. Robyn shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Christine looked down, fingers twisting together. Janelle wiped a silent tear away. Meri breathed deeply. And the worst part was, you didn't even finish it. You just let me fade away. Bit by bit, day by day, until I was a ghost in my own marriage. She glanced at the judge for an instant, her voice firming. This is not about revenge. This is about finally speaking out loud what I've whispered in empty rooms for years. Then she glanced back at Kody. You made me invisible, Kody. But today, I will not be silent anymore. There was silence in the courtroom. The judge leaned forward slightly, as if he also sensed the gravity of her words. Even the court clerk's pen had halted. Meri went on more forcefully. I stood and watched you construct your new life around Robyn. I watched the way your eyes shone with her, the way they once shone with me, and I waited, stupidly, for you to look back and see that I was still here. But you didn't. You led me to believe that my hurt didn't count, that my love didn't count. Her tone became more acidic. You always told us that we were a family, that we were special. But family doesn't play favorites and label it love. Family doesn't keep someone in the dark, because they met someone more radiant elsewhere. Kody's knuckles turned white as his hands gripped the table tighter. But Meri's stare didn't falter. I kept holding on, she breathed, even when letting go hurt more than holding on. Because I was scared. Scared that leaving would mean that I was weak. Scared that it would make everything meaningless. But now I can see walking away isn't weakness. It's survival. Robyn dipped her head. Her shoulders shook. Christine reached over and rested her hand lightly on Robyn's arm. Not in forgiveness, but in mutual suffering. Meri advanced towards the stand. Do you know what the worst part was, Kody? She whispered. It wasn't the silence. It wasn't seeing you love somebody else. It was that you didn't even notice when I quit trying. She left that to hang there like a sword. You never fought for me. Not once. For the first time throughout the whole trial, Kody's eyes welled up with tears. They didn't fall, but they shone like something snapped within him. You tell me this family is broken because of everyone else, Meri said, her words slicing through the silence. But the truth is, it broke because of your choices. Because of how you made love into a hierarchy. Because of how you left us to fight for scraps of attention, while you constructed a kingdom around one woman. The air was thick. Even the cameras in the room hummed softly, as if the very moment called for deference. I loved you, she said finally, now barely above a whisper. And that's why it hurts so much. I loved you more than I loved myself. But love shouldn't make you vanish. It shouldn't make you feel like a shadow in your life. She wiped the corner of her eye, but there were no tears. So I'm here not as a wife, not as a woman who waited too long, but as someone who finally sees the truth. I mattered. I always did. You just chose not to see it. She shifted slightly towards the judge. And today I decide to be seen, even if it means leaving everything behind. As Meri headed back to her chair, the quiet wasn't vacant anymore. It was filled. Full of years of hurt finally voiced out loud. Full of words that had dwelled in shadows long enough. Kody's chest lifted and fell quickly. His hands wrapped around the table as if it alone kept him from collapsing. He attempted to catch her gaze, but she didn't glance his way. Because this time, she didn't require his eyes to know she was truly there. Christine took Meri's hand and sat down gently. Janelle nodded gently. Robyn sat rigidly, shame etched across her face. The judge finally breathed out, dispelling the tension. Mrs. Brown, he spoke, this time in a lower tone. Thank you for your testimony. But the true judgment wasn't in his words. It was in the silent strength emanating from Meri. She had entered that stand as a forgotten one. She left it as an unbreakable one. And Kody sat there staring at the space she used to occupy. A space now lost forever. The courtroom atmosphere clung like a dense fog. Each and every testimony had been given. Every hurt reopened. Every unsaid truth finally pulled out into the light. The judge remained still for what felt like an eternity, shuffling through pages of paper that now meant nothing next to the seriousness of the words uttered in that room. The sound of his pen hitting paper rang out. Tap, tap, tap. Like a slow, steady beat. Kody Brown sat silently in the defense table. His fists were so tight his knuckles turned white. He had dictated the terms for years. He'd assured himself he was the leader of a viable family. But in this courtroom, beneath their own truth, he wasn't the head of anything. He was merely a man, stripped of the facade he'd constructed. Meri sat with her posture straight, her gaze fixed but shining with tears. She refused to shed. Christine looked down at her clasped hands, quietly inhaling the liberty she'd not known was already burgeoning in her chest. Janelle eyed him intently, her face smooth. Not mean, not furious. Just finished. And Robyn? Robyn's hands trembled as she clutched a tissue already wet. She had never seemed smaller. The judge eventually leaned forward. His deep, measured voice sliced the quiet like a knife. This isn't a typical case, he said slowly. There is no crime in the legal sense. No charges of theft, or violence or fraud. But make no mistake, what has happened here is no less real, no less destructive. Every head turned toward him. Even Kody lifted his eyes. This is a case of betrayal, the judge went on. Of broken trust. Of a family shattered not by one instant, but by years of decisions. Kody gulped hard. His chest heaved up and down like a man perched on the rim of a cliff. The judge looked at Christine. You talked about pain that was disregarded. He gazed at Janelle. You talked about control and aloofness. Then at Meri. You talked of invisibility. And silence. Lastly he directed his stare toward Kody. And you? You opted for power over partnership. The words landed him like a slow, hard punch. He dropped his eyes, his jaw quivering ever so slightly. For the first time in years, he didn't have a retort. He didn't have a handle. The judge rapped his pen again, this time more gently. This court cannot penalize a man for not loving right, he declared. But it can admit the truth. And today, the truth has been said. Plainly, painfully, courageously. He laid down the pen. What comes after today is not a matter of law. It is a matter of the heart. But what is certain is that this family, as it was, no longer exists. The words swept around the courtroom like a chill wind. Christine took a deep breath. Janelle let it out slowly. Meri shut her eyes. Not in agony but in release. And Robyn bowed her head. Tears flowing quietly. But Kody just sat there. The judge went on. Sometimes the verdict isn't about punishing. Sometimes it's about recognizing the harm wrought. And allowing those who have been harmed the ability to leave without shame. He sat back in his chair. His tone going gentle. This family is no longer held together by illusions that previously served it. You are free to choose for yourselves. Free to reconstruct what was lost to you. Then was the sound that caused everyone's heart to jump. Bang! The gavel of the judge struck the block. Hard and final. This court is adjourned. The courtroom doors groaned as the bailiff pushed them open. Outside, sunlight streamed through the glass doors, illuminating the hallway with a warm golden light. For what felt like an eternity, no one stirred. It was as if they were all hanging at the edge of a new beginning. And none of them had any idea how to make the first step. At last, Christine rose. Her hands shook a little, but her chin was raised. She looked at Meri and Janelle, a small weary smile flirting at the edges of her mouth. It's over, she said softly. Janelle nodded. No, she said quietly. It's just beginning. Meri got up slowly beside him, her heart racing. She looked at Kody once more. Not with anger, not with love, but with the inner strength of one who no longer requires answers. She didn't owe him anything. Not anymore. Robyn got up last. Her cheeks were smeared with tears. She parted her lips as if to say something to Kody. But nothing emerged, because in her heart she knew that whatever was broken wasn't something she could repair. Kody sat by himself. He saw them. The women who had once spun around his universe moved toward the exits together. Not as competitors. Not as fragmented shards, but as survivors. Each step they took away from him was a step towards their own healing. Each inch of distance between them was a reminder that he no longer had the power that he once did. Christine was the first to reach the door and turned back for a moment. Her eyes met Kody's across the room. There was no anger. No revenge, just a quiet truth. You did this, and now we're free. She took a step back and emerged into the light. Janelle came behind her, steady and composed, bringing with her the quiet strength that had always dwelled within her. Meri hesitated for the slightest moment, as if she had shut an invisible door within her heart. Then she crossed over, leaving the man who once made her feel diminutive. Robyn hung back. Tears came freely now. She wished to remain, to cling to the fantasy of the man she loved. But when she looked at him, she didn't see the same man any longer. She saw what they all now saw, the truth. She breathed once deeply, and departed. And then the doors closed. The courtroom was otherwise bare, save for Kody. The once focal point of it all now sat silently. No cameras, no wives, no voices defending him. Only silence. He sat forward, elbows resting on knees, hands clasped together, as if he could clench something that was lost to him. For the first time, the room was not about him. It engulfed him. One tear fell down his face, quietly onto the shiny floor. He spoke softly, nearly to himself. What have I done? The words bounced back, tiny and empty, lost within the walls. No one remained to respond. Outside the courthouse, Christine, Meri and Janelle stood side by side on the steps, the sun on their faces. And for an instant, they just breathed. No cameras, no burden of his control. Just air, just space, just freedom. Christine laughed. Not too loud a laugh, but the soft, tentative kind that gets away when you don't quite believe something's real yet. Meri reached out and clutched her hand. Janelle wrapped an arm around the both of them. For the first time in years, they didn't feel like fragments of a broken system. They felt like women who had chosen themselves. The world outside them was still turning. But within their little bubble, time had slowed down. And in that quiet, healing had started. Back in his seat, Kody finally got up. He adjusted his jacket. But it did not make him larger. It did not make him powerful once more. It only made the space feel hollow. He walked out of the courtroom by himself, his footsteps ringing out against the walls. Something no one longed for anymore. The sun warmed his face as he walked out, but unlike the women, it stung on his skin. He gazed down the stairs and watched them disappear from view, not once glancing back. He reached for something in the air. Perhaps hope, perhaps memory. But his hand closed on nothing, because everything he once held in control had already dissolved away. And there, in that instant, Kody Brown at last encountered the truth he'd been trying to escape for years. You can dictate tales. You can dictate people. But you cannot dictate the instant they no longer need you. The judgment wasn't inscribed on paper. It wasn't etched in stone. It was in the way they walked away. Heads held high. Hearts burdened but unencumbered. Kody turned, his eyes on the courthouse doors. The building that had seen the fall of everything he'd created. And then he descended the steps. Slowly, quietly. A man denied everything but his remorse. As he dissolved into the throngs, one thing was certain. This wasn't the end of their story. It was the start of theirs. Without him,